forward to the keynote address, Leaders in the New World by Paul Dupuis, MD and CEO Randstad India, author of the E5 movement, followed by a fireside chat with Dr. Anurag Batra, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief, BW Business World and Exchange for Media Group. Over to you, Paul.
Great, thank you, Vandana, and good evening, everyone. It's great to be here today. First of all, let me say on behalf of Randstad, we're so pleased to partner with Business World on this very important event. And I must say, I've been enjoying today. I've been listening in since the morning, listening to the panelists, of course, the discussions that have been happening. Of course, I'm very familiar and acquainted with many of the people who have spoken today and agree with so much of what's been said. This is an important moment for all of us, particularly in the world of HR, and especially at this juncture in this crisis as we look ahead to the future. So it's a privilege to be here today to give the keynote address, to talk a little bit about my journey, and also share some of my ideas about the future of leadership, and particularly how it's relevant to HR. So today we're going to talk a little bit about my journey, I've been working across the Asia Pacific region now for many years. In fact, apologies, I'm just having a little bit of technical difficulty here. Just bear with me for one moment and we'll come back. All right, and we are back. And that's part of the reality of being in the digital world here now. So a little bit more about, back to my story. I've been living and working in the APAC region now for many years. In fact, I just celebrated my 30th year working and living in the Asia region. I left Canada 30 years ago. In fact, September 1990, when I ventured off to Japan with a backpack and a dream and ambition. I actually went to study the martial arts, thought I would stay for 6 months, and 30 years later, here we are in incredible India. I'm now the MD and CEO of Randstad India, based here in Bangalore. And what a journey it's been along the way. I've been very fortunate to work in many countries, including the ones you see on the screen here, and beyond, of course. Randstad being a global company originally with Dutch roots. I've had the pleasure to work in Europe and, of course, through North America and beyond. But a large portion of my work experience and my leadership experience has been centered around the APAC region, and especially in Japan. I was in Japan in and out several times through my career, about 25 years in total, in fact. And I've also lived in Singapore and worked in some of the countries you see there. And now in India for about 3.5 years. And what an incredible journey it's been so far. And as I've had the opportunity to lead across borders in APAC, in Europe and beyond, both in the corporate world and the business world, leading large organizations, but also as a chairman of an MPO and a volunteer, of course, as well as Canadian. I'm an ice hockey player, so I've been a coach, I've been a captain, of course, I've been a player. So I've been both a leader and a follower. I've started to discover that there are a lot of similarities when we talk about exceptional leadership. And we'll take it one step further, game-changing leadership. And I'd like to talk to you about what that is today. We'll call it the X factor. You know, when I came to India, often the question I was asked is, what is the difference leading in India compared to leading in other countries and other markets? And as I started to reflect on it a bit more, I realized that, in fact, there are more similarities than there are differences when we talk about effective leadership. And this is certainly relevant for all of our HR colleagues on today's webinar. When we talk about simple principles like transparency, honesty, walking the talk, making a promise and delivering on it. These are things that are borderless. And so when we talk about exceptional or effective leadership, it's actually borderless. All of the rules apply across borders. And that was one big discovery for me. So my leadership style, whether I'm in Japan or India or Singapore or in the Netherlands, is essentially the same. It's about being the kind of leader that I would want to follow myself. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between a competent manager and a game-changing leader. The world is full of competent managers, and we need the competent manager. The competent manager is someone who follows the processes, who delivers on the KPIs, who follows the SOPs, and does what is expected. The competent managers are really what makes most organizations tick. They play the game well. The game-changing leader, however, doesn't just play the game well. The game-changing leader changes the game. and takes it one step further, creates the new game. These are the visionaries. These are the people that are not satisfied with the status quo. In fact, they're always pushing for something better, with the spirit of being better than yesterday. And in the process of being a juror in the 40 under 40 challenge here, is what I've discovered is every single candidate who came forward talked about this burning desire, this passion, we'll call it a burning ambition to be better, to change the world, to do things differently. The game-changing leaders, and particularly those within the HR fraternity that I've come to know, and I would say especially in India, are the ones that are always dreaming, thinking about something new, thinking, what if, and why not, and let's give it a try. These are the people that really activate and instigate change. And again, I give credit to everyone who stepped forward to be in this competition for the best 40 under 40. All of you, when you made your presentations, really showed that passion for making change. You were not satisfied with the status quo, and that's why you stepped up. And I learned a lot from those sessions. As a leader of a large, complex organization, we cover the four corners of India. We put more than 60,000 people to work every day. We have offices from Guwahati all the way down to Cochin. And in the process, I've come up with a leadership model that guides me. In a way, it's my own North Star. And this is something that I've built over many years of being a leader, as I mentioned earlier, both in the sports arena, of course, in the corporate world, and also in volunteering and so on. And this model I'd like to share with you briefly. And I've written a book on it recently as well. It's called the E5, and it's about game-changing leadership. The first E, which is critical for the leader who wants to really change the game and make an exceptional impact, is about envision. Envision is about coming up with your vision of what the world would look like when you make that change. And it's not about necessarily just the what or the outcome or the output. And this is where many leaders, and I'm sure many of my HR colleagues can relate to this, when we focus on profit, when we focus on revenue, when we focus on the metrics, the results, we miss the most critical element of vision. And that's the purpose, the greater purpose, the why. What will the world look like when we make this change? And every leader, regardless of their level in the organization, regardless of their role, regardless of their function, has an opportunity to create that compelling vision, a vision that touches the hearts and the minds, and also talks about what's in it for the people who will help bring that vision to life. The next E is express. So taking that carefully crafted vision that touches the hearts and the minds and bringing it out to the team, bringing it out to the floor, bringing it out to the world. In our current world, that means bringing it out virtually and expressing it in a way that's digestible, that's simple, that's powerful. And express requires an omni-channel strategy to do that. And I'm sure my HR colleagues can relate to this when we talk about rolling out new policies, whether it's around rewards and recognition, learning and development, and so on. It's so important that we do it in a way that people actually absorb it. And of course, they see the greater purpose and they get excited about it. And that's the third E that the game-changing leader needs to address, getting people excited about the vision. And this is a moment of truth. This is when leaders have the audience leaning in. And the audience and the team starts to say things like, when can we start? This is great. I want to be part of this. And what you start to see is the wheels start to move. And as you see in this model, these are interconnected wheels. They're gear wheels. And when that excite wheel starts to move, watch out, because something happens. And it's a moment of truth. And in fact, it's magical. This is when a movement is created. And the leader then shifts to the next phase, which is also critical for success, to become leader as enabler, to provide the tools, the platform, the arena, the learning and development, the skills, and of course the support to bring that vision to life. And as a leader myself, I'm actually focused quite heavily now in this stage of my career on being an enabler. And I must say that my HR director, Anjali, is by my side all the time when I talk about enabling. And on the other side, I have my CFO, Vichy, who I also consult often about this enabling piece, along with all of the CXOs in my organization. But I must say that the CHRO and the CFO are two critical confidants for a CEO when you talk about enabling the organization to change the game, to make an impact, to make history, to change the world, to take a leading position, to be better than yesterday. And finally, the moment of truth for all leaders, regardless of your role, and I'm sure all of my HR colleagues will agree on this one. At the end of the day, it's about execution. This is the final moment of truth. But if you get the vision right, it touches the hearts and the mind, it has greater purpose. If you express in an omni-channel way, if you excite people about this vision and they're in and they want to get started, and if you enable them and get out of their way, execution is almost inevitable. I'd like to share something I think is very relevant for all of us now. If you think about 1 year ago, in the fall last year, think about what you were doing right around this time last year in your organization. Probably many of the colleagues here in HR were talking about rolling out new policies for the new year. You were talking about your learning and development strategy, your organizational development strategy, rewards and recognition, and so on and so on. You were probably leaning more towards digital in many of the processes that you handle within the organization. Well, we came into the new year, 2020, with the wind at our backs. I think we were all very optimistic. 2020 was set up to be an amazing year for India and the world. In fact, India was slated to have the fastest growing GDP in the world, fastest growing economy, youngest workforce, and fastest growing workforce in the world. And we all started with optimism. Of course, we all know what happened soon into the new year. By March, and in the case of Randstad, March 15th, we made that difficult decision to move from business as usual to working from home, and now we call it working from remote, which is essentially working from anywhere. And it's been more than 6 months where we're in this brand new world. We started to call it the new normal, but I would suggest it's a new world, and we're moving forward into a new way of living, a new way of working, a new way of collaborating and delivering service. This is the 20-mile march. And the 20-mile march is actually from Jim Collins, from his book, Great by Choice, where he talks about organizations that thrive during times of crisis. And what he said through their empirical study, what they found was the organizations that stayed focused on their mission, on the greater purpose, on the why, on their true north, and took one step at a time, focused on the journey as a marathon, not a sprint. These are the companies that had a crystal clear true north, and everyone in the organization knew what it was and why it was important, and they felt it. And these are the organizations that focused on incremental improvement, which was measurable, from the business right to the front end, right to the very back end, and everything in between. These organizations thrived in times of crisis. In fact, these organizations grew, they outgrew the market, and they did one more very important thing. They future-proofed themselves. They accelerated ahead of the pack. These are the winning organizations. We are in a 20-mile march. We have ambiguity, we have adversity, we have unpredictability about the way ahead. But I see every day when I speak with CXOs and the CHROs that I speak to, particularly the ones who are in organizations that are leading the way, are dreaming. They're asking what if and why not. They're in the mode of experimenting. And we know that's where greatness is made, because nothing great has been achieved when someone stays in their comfort zone. It's a 20-mile march. And in the process of the 20-mile march, we discovered something. And I'll take a little bit of a sports analogy. All of our colleagues here in India who are watching, of course, know these two people. P.T. Usha, the queen of track and field, legendary, and of course, Sachin. And for all of the colleagues who are outside of India watching this right now, and I know there are many of you, you also know that Sachin Tendulkar was a legendary cricket player. Well, these two athletes, legendary athletes, performed at a very high level for so many years. And I compare this to someone who's a high performer in business in the organization to sports. Very, very similar. It's about healthy cadence. And if you talk to these two athletes, they'll tell you a story. And I read Sachin's biography. It's fascinating. I've seen the movie as well. But what you see is a pattern here with high performers anywhere, in any genre, whether it's in the arts, in sports, in business, and beyond. And that is, they all focused on finding their healthy cadence. Let's call it the sweet spot of how they live, how they think, how they behave. Exceptional performance comes from exceptional behavior. And it starts with the most simple things about how we take care of ourselves physically. And as we've discovered through this crisis over the past 6 or 7 months, how we take care of ourselves mentally. We'll call it be kind to your body and be kind to your mind. High-performing athletes, high-performing people in organizations who really change the game, find their zone, and they protect it at all costs. They find that healthy cadence. And I encourage everyone who's listening today to think about the 20-mile march. It's a marathon, and the importance of finding that healthy cadence, because we are in for a long journey ahead. Let's pause and look back just for a moment. If you think back to those of you who've been in the world of HR for many years, you'll probably recognize this scene right here. Way back in the days when HR was called personnel, the personnel department. We had very complex org charts, and part of the onboarding for new colleagues when they joined the organization was to look at an org chart. And the org chart was often almost like a magical algorithm. Reminds me of the movie The Matrix. And explaining it was a skill in and of itself. And of course, in here, the comment is that we've made it easy for you. Well, what we do know is we've come a long way. HR is no longer about personnel and org charts and hierarchies. The leading organizations, the truly game-changing HR professionals that I meet every day are not talking about org charts. They're not talking about payroll. Of course, there are transactional elements to the role of HR. There are transactional elements to the job, and that's the nature of it, of course. But they're talking about strategy. They're talking about enabling. They're talking about what if and experimenting. So that chart, that paper will look a lot different today. It'd be less about org charts and more about ideas for the future and brainstorming. And of course, paperwork. Well, all of us who have been around for a while remember those days when you went on holiday and you came back and there were stacks of paper on your desk. Well, things haven't changed too much. Now, the difference is it's not stacks of paper on the desk, it's emails. And how many of us has gone away and come back to 200, 300, 400, in my case recently, almost 500 emails. And of course, every email is critical. And this really raises the question of how do we handle this world of the infodemic, where there's just too much information? And how do we stay mindful when our minds are so full? It's a challenging time for all of us, especially now as we're virtual. We look back, it's time to look forward. I believe that Moore's Law, we all know that Moore's Law basically said that technology was on a 2-year cycle. Well, Moore's Law has actually become obsolete. Moore's Law is now really about today, tomorrow, and one more, D.A.T, the day after tomorrow. And when I meet with the game-changing leaders in India, what I see is leaders talking about tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, already planning for 2021 and beyond, already planning for a world with COVID, navigating through COVID, delivering service, enabling the teams to shine, and doing it in a way that marries digital with the touch. And we'll call it tech for touch. So planning for the day after tomorrow is a critical element of leading change. I would ask all of you watching today, what is your day after tomorrow plan? What is your D.A.T? The D.A.T should be strategic. And if we talk about this simply within the HR framework, of course, and beyond, but for all the HR leaders on the call, strategic versus transactional. Gone are the days where HR was all about transactional functions. I told you earlier, when I need to make very difficult decisions, where I need to think about the future of my organization, I call several people into my room. And one of the first people to come in is my head of HR. Because everything we do in the organization starts with people. And being strategic means let's talk about people and how we can help people shine. It's moving from transactional to strategic. Digital, wow, we all know we've been forced to move from an analog world to digital. But one point of caution, I think this is especially true for our HR colleagues watching today. And I saw it in some of your presentations, by the way. Let's be careful not to rely too much on digital to do the important stuff. Remember, at the end of the day, there's no replacement for human touch. Now, we are using a virtual way of connecting, just like we're doing today, to connect, to collaborate, and so on. But let's not allow the digital processes to replace something that requires the human touch. We haven't found a chatbot yet that can show compassion. We haven't found a chatbot yet that can lean in when someone really needs help and provide the physical help that they need. That's only something that a human being can do. We haven't found a chatbot that can read the air, that can read the expression on someone's face when they might have something on their mind and they need to share it. So let's be careful to embrace digital, but not forget about the most important piece, which is touch. HR, every single element of HR, from A to Z of HR, the specialism within, is about enabling. I strongly believe that if you have a solid HR team in place, which is focused every day on enabling, on experimenting, on trying, that spirit then helps to turbocharge the performance of the organization. And we've seen it. The organizations where we talk about, well, we've done it like this, we should always do it like this. Those are the organizations that are lagging, and we see that today. The organizations that are leading the way are the ones that are welcoming in new ideas, new ways of doing it, and then enabling the teams to shine. And that's really a key role of the HR team. And finally, I think HR as influencer. We often have seen over the years that HR in general was reactive. When it was time for learning and development, an order was placed and it was done. When it was time to hire someone, talent acquisition took the order and went. It's completely flipped upside down, 180 degrees, where HR now needs to be leading the way on these strategic discussions and bringing the ideas to the table for action. In fact, again, some of the best ideas in our organization, if I look at some of the most effective game-changing experiments that we've done in the organization that have helped us accelerate ahead of our competition, they've been activated by our HR team. Brainstorming, we call it whiteboarding, where we come up with ideas together and we pick and choose the ones that we're going to focus on and we give it a shot. Ultimately, though, it should be about being a game changer, not a game player. And I would challenge all of the HR leaders on today's webinar to think about yourself as a game changer, not as a game player, not as reactive, but as proactive, as someone who creates. I told you earlier, I'm a passionate student of leadership. I read it, I read about it, I practice it, and I see it as kind of like a muscle, and it's a never-ending journey. And regardless of your role in the organization, whether you're a leader of people or you're simply in a role where you're an individual contributor, you are still a leader. You have the opportunity to lead through your actions. And with that, it's important to always be reading. So I'm a voracious reader, and there's just a few books I'd like to recommend to you today as takeaways. First one is What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall Goldsmith actually has had quite an influence on me. I'm actually engaging him as my coach now, and I just met with him this morning. He's a very inspiring guy. He challenges you on a lot of things. And one of the things that Marshall talks about is that the skill set that kind of got us from there to here is not really what's going to take us to the future. I do believe that some of what has got us from there to here will indeed be an asset as we move forward, but we have to constantly build new muscle, especially now as we move into the new world. It's a great book. Take a look at it. Good to Great. One of my Bibles, Jim Collins, who talks about level 5 leadership, talks about organizations that went from good to great and how they did it. Interestingly, they had a culture of discipline. They had a culture of where they focused on being better than yesterday every day. Exponential organizations, it's about massive transformational purpose. And of course, managers, the day after tomorrow, focusing on the day after tomorrow and the future. With that, I'll end my presentation. I want to say thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to meet with you today. And of course, to Anurag, who is the engine behind all of this, tirelessly. Anurag, I must say, I enjoy all of your webinars, but this particular event is extra special for me, and really glad to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for inspiring us, for being who you are. They say best way to preach something is to practice it. You lead by example. And I loved your sharing the books. I've read each one of those books. But while we need coaches, because we can exercise ourselves, but we get a trainer at home. So it brings a certain external view. You build a relationship, and you want to live up to the inputs that come from the expert in that relationship. But I love what you said. When I was preparing for a business school, I would prepare for a group discussion, and they'd say, "You are what you read for breakfast." You are what you read for breakfast, not eat for breakfast. So books and leaders can have influence, and sometimes the wisdom of the leaders can be distilled through books. Today we have video blogs, we have coaching, we have platforms like Tiger Hall. But in olden days, there were only books that you could refer to. So, Paul, while you refer to those books, I want to talk to you. What are your top 3 predictions for the future?
Well, Anurag, that's a great question, and none of us have a crystal ball, and all leaders will tell you we lead through ambiguity. But one of the things we know is we learn from the past. Clearly, this is not a new normal. We're moving into a new world. The way we collaborate, the way we engage, the way we serve will change, and digital will become central to all of our conversations. So I see a rapidly growing digital world ahead of us.
Okay, but you also said, I heard everyone, that the more the digital grows, don't just rely on digital. The value of human touch even grows more. Anything that is scarcity, the heart goes fonder for it. So while everything becomes digital, whatever we are doing this event through a compulsion of doing it digitally, but when we have a choice, do you think there will be a place for a hybrid model, whether it's in education, whether it's in hiring, whether it's in media, whether it's in events? So give us a sense of that, Paul.
Well, and again, this is a compelling question for all of us who are leading organizations, because traditionally we had large footprints. I mentioned, Randstad in India, we have more than 70 locations across the country. Globally, we have thousands of locations. And you think about footprints. We are rethinking the purpose of the office. So back to your point about hybrid, absolutely, we're moving to a hybrid way of work. There are some roles, of course, essential services that will continue to be face-to-face, and they're absolutely required. But generally, we're discovering that most roles can be done in a hybrid way. Some can be completely and permanently done from remote. So I think the purpose of the office, the workplace, is going to change. I believe the office is going to be transformed not as a place to do work, but as a place to celebrate and a place to collaborate. That the work can be done anywhere, and we've proven that because we've been forced to do that. So absolutely hybrid way of working, and most of the data shows around the world, by the way, especially in India, that a lot of people are uncomfortable going back to an office situation, and they're able to be productive in their remote work.
More important, and safety as a
exactly. That's right. Yeah, and I think that's the next point I'd like to make, Anurag. The nature of leadership is changing rapidly. I would just look in the mirror at myself for a moment. I've been forced to build a muscle. We talked a lot about IQ for many years, then we talked about EQ for many years. But I think the latest one and the newest one, which is very important, and for me especially, is the compassion quotient. It's one step beyond empathy. And compassion is when we really genuinely care about our people, the people around us, and that we ensure that not only are they safe, but are they engaged and are they healthy? And of course, out of that comes productivity.
Thank you so much. My last question to you. You alluded to it. Work is not an office place. Work is about outcomes and results. You have talked about presenteeism in the past. Tell us, how do leaders and HR heads measure outcomes in a virtual world? Of course, we know salespeople will be judged on how, but in a lot of functions, there is a certain fuzziness. How do measuring outcomes become even more important in this virtual environment?
Absolutely. So 2 points. One, and I know especially enabling functions are battling with this. On the business side, the metrics are clear. You set a target, you hit the metric target, and you've achieved, right? When it comes to enabling functions, like you said, it tends to be gray. But one of the things we've done in our organizations, we establish 4 clear pillars for every single enabling function. And of those pillars, there are critical elements. We'll call them rocks. And the other stuff are the pebbles. So if you talk to every CXO in our organization, including our CHRO, she will tell you that she has 4 pillars, and those pillars are missions. And what feeds those missions are the rocks. And each person on the team is responsible, together with others, to move those rocks forward, to make change. And we can measure that change by how much movement there is in the needle. So it can be done, but I think it comes back to what I said earlier about envision. Make sure you have a clear North Star. If you are part of an HR team, what is your greater purpose? Why do you exist? If you're talking about profit, you're talking about the wrong purpose. That's an outcome of having the right people with the right strategy, with the right tools and the right culture, moving together in the same direction, shoulder to shoulder. That's not the ultimate goal. That is an outcome. So I think that to me is a key element moving forward, Anurag. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for being part of the jury. Thank you for inspiring the audience with your, practical, pragmatic, yet futuristic inputs. The enabling framework can certainly be helpful to a leader, and I recommend that while Paul is the MD of Randstad, as he shared, he's written a book called The E5 Movement. I would encourage you to look at it and read it. So all the best, Paul. God bless you. We look forward to seeing you at the awards in some time. It's back to you.
Thank you, Anurag. See you this evening.
Yes. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Batra, and thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.